Welcome back to our YouTube page. It's been a minute since we've posted. In today's video, I'm just going to give you a quick look at one of the other gardens at Halcyon Bounty that keeps us really busy, our veggie patch. Last growing season, we were fortunate enough to be able to travel abroad, and the garden just got left to its own devices. So the first task for spring was clearing out the overgrowth and redefining the garden beds. So this video isn't necessarily in chronological order. I did a walkthrough with the camera a few months ago, and I have just chopped and interspersed pictures and things along the way. So the video covers spring, summer, and now we're halfway through autumn. In past years, we'd grown corn and beans in this part of the garden. Now we're using it as an area to house our compost bins and the worm farms. The little gum tree at the side gives a nice bit of shady cover for the worm farms. We've had a couple of unsuccessful attempts to get a passion fruit vine growing in other parts of the garden. So this is us giving it a last stitch, creating some arches to grow the passion fruits on and setting up a new bed. I really enjoy these simple arches. They're just made by using a length of trench mesh and, as you can see, stretching it up over the space that we want to use. I've used them in other parts of the garden too. I would normally secure them a little bit more with some star pickets or something like that hammered into the sides. But on this occasion, because it's a veggie patch and because it's forever changeable, I've just pushed them into the ground and they seem to be solid enough. We have horrible couch grass here throughout the property, and it's always a battle to keep it out of the growing areas. So we've done our best here to dig up all the roots that we could, pull them out of the garden, and we generally lay a thick layer of cardboard and newspaper on any of the beds before we add any growing medium. It suppresses the weeds a little. We're just wetting down the cardboard and newspaper with the liquid that's come out of our worm farms. We're also throwing in half a bag of rooster booster fertiliser that was sitting around in the garden unused. Then we've filled the garden bed with a combination of planting compost and just ordinary potting mix or garden soil in bags. I've mentioned in the past that we tend to use this system, definitely not the cheapest way to buy soil, but for us two old girls working in the garden, it's definitely the most manageable way for us to handle these things. There's not a lot of digging required, which is something that we find a little bit of a physical strain these days. We tend to buy the cheapest, reasonable sort of quality bag potting mix and things that we can, and then we boost it up with making sure that we feed the gardens fairly regularly and adding in our own mix of compost and our own worm castings and liquid fertilisers. We were lucky enough to pick up two fairly healthy looking passion fruit vines at a clearance table at the end of the season at Bunnings, which is what's inspired us to give this another go. We've educated ourselves through Google and YouTube, and apparently passion fruit likes a really sunny position, and this spot is good for that. It gets sun most of the day, and it likes to climb over some sort of structure, and the ideal situation is to be able to pick the fruit from below. So let's hope this garden setup works. It's also recommended that you give the plants a really thorough watering with some sort of fish emulsion mixed with water when you first plant them to help with the shock of being transplanted. And they say that you should put this on the leaves as well as a really deep water into the roots. So that's what's going on next. So hopefully this time next season we'll be able to show you some really vigorous vines and some lush growth on these plants, and maybe even some passion fruits. To continue on through the garden, you can see the still somewhat overgrown raspberries. We dug out a lot that had self-planted all through the garden bed. These ones we left pretty much to their own devices for this season in the hopes of getting fruit. We ended up with about, I think, 4 or 5 kilos. This is the red and black currant bushes, both of which produced a lot of fruit this year, but now they're waiting for their winter cutback. You can see the 2 lime trees and 2 different sorts of lemon trees that we have. They're all laden with fruit at the moment, but waiting for the first frost before things start to ripen again. Rhubarb, and here we have a bed of coriander which has gone to seed. We tend to let things go to seed and either sell seed back into the gardens, or we collect the seeds for planting next year. The bay tree, and underneath it is thyme, which at this point in time needed a big haircut and a feed. Rosemary and some volunteer silver beet. We never have a shortage of silver beet in our garden. Here we planted bok choy, but with the crazy summer heat, it bolted straight to seed. So I'm letting the seeds dry out. We'll collect them, and hopefully we'll get a volunteer crop coming up for autumn. We planted 4 little yellow squash, and we've had a bumper harvest. We've probably had about a dozen or more really nice sized squash off these plants. And now that we're just heading into autumn, the plants have suddenly started to do a second crop, and we have, I guess there's about 30 or more squash coming on at the moment. Beside the squash, we've got a good harvest of carrots, and we're about to reseed carrots in a number of places in the garden. Masses of mint. And then in our standing raised beds, which are by far my favourite in the garden, this year I added some arches over the top, and yeah, have really enjoyed this growing experience. On the first arch we planted scarlet runner beans. One, because the flower is just absolutely beautiful and they made a great display, but we've never grown them before. Apparently they are perennial, so they will just, once they die off this season, they will just come up from the roots again next year, so we'll see how that goes. I didn't love them as a fresh bean. Unless you pick them very, very small, then they are a bit tough in my opinion. So we've let them grow for dry beans, and as the weather's now starting to set in and we're getting a bit of rain, we decided that we would harvest all of them and hang them to dry. The beans in these are really quite large, and because the bean pod itself is very long, you get 4 or 5 beans for every pod. So we're looking forward to some lovely dried beans. We're halfway through autumn and they're still producing flowers and more baby beans, so we'll probably get another crop. We love tomatoes and we always grow a lot of them across the season in different varieties, as well as the advantage of having beautiful, fresh, unbelievable tasting tomatoes across the season. Mum also makes all of our soups and sauces and chutneys and pasta sauce jars and everything ready to freeze. And we've had a huge crop this year. We always pick the tomatoes when they just start to get a bit of colour and then ripen them up on the table, because there are some teethy animals in our garden who, as soon as they start to get ripe, also like to go in for their share. Putting them in a box covered in a dark place for 2 or 3 days, they end up really, really red, and we end up with a huge crop of these tomatoes. This big basket, we've been harvesting about a basket full once every 2 or 3 days. Now I have to ask the question, how many kohlrabi is too many kohlrabi for 2 old girls? We planted about 8 or 10 of them. They've all come up and they've all grown into beautiful, beautiful plants. But after you've worked your way through 2 large kohlrabi, we run out of ideas of how to eat them. If anybody got any clues, we'd love to hear it. It's been a strange growing season indeed. We're now partway into autumn and we're only just getting our very first cucumbers, and the Malabar spinach has only just now started to come on. We also have some blue lake beans, which are by far my favourite to just pick off the vine and eat, or to have cooked in any number of ways. A few late beetroot, and my eggplants have just started to come on. We're into autumn and we're seeing the first fruit. A very crazy season. The first lot of snow peas have now finished. They were delicious. We'll have to plant some more. They can grow through most of the year, so some more there. But you'll see the pumpkin has taken over part of the growing vine. Now, growing pumpkins on an arch is something that I've always wanted to try. These are Jap pumpkins and they have been amazing. There are only 2 little plants in here, and you can see that they've grown right over the archway and taken up part of the growing trellis for the peas and beans. They also had tendrils that ran all over the ground. Interestingly enough, the ones on the ground did not form any fruit, but all the ones in the air have made these beautiful pumpkins. This bed also has our capsicum plants. Now, I didn't know until recently that capsicums are perennials. These plants are actually 3 years old, and this year we have the best and the largest and most number of capsicums growing on these plants. Are absolutely beautiful. They're really hungry though. I think one of the big differences this year is putting some shade over them in this incredibly ridiculous weather, and making sure that they're very well fed. Keeping water up to the the trees this year has been an incredible task because it has just been so ridiculously hot. The summer had so many heat wave days and no rain for such a long period of time. You see the long hose here going up to our tank where we've just been drip feeding water out to some of the larger plants. This is our Bosch pear, and although it still has quite a lot of fruit on it, you can see that the skin of the fruit is really hard and dry, and the size is quite small. Our asparagus and parsley pad let to go to seed. Keeping water up to the orchard has been a real challenge this summer, almost impossible. We've still got more than enough fruit for us. We've got plenty of apricots and plums, but the pears and apples have suffered a bit, and the crop number on those has been really, really well reduced. At the start of the season, we didn't plan on planting these beds at all. They were very overgrown and it seemed insurmountable to get the weeds and everything out. But bit by bit we did, and we just filled them up with whatever crops we had. We had way too many tomato seedlings for the main bed, so they went in here, and Mum planted every old pumpkin seed that she could find. So the beds are just filled up really to have a cover crop for this season. The okra's been another late starter. The seedlings went in early in spring, but it's now autumn. It's taken until autumn for them to come on, and they're producing, but it's at a fairly slow rate. It's actually quite good. I can pick 3 or 4 okra a time at the moment now. Maybe once a week I'll get 3 or 4 okra, which is great because Mum doesn't like them, and that's plenty for me. We planted a soft leafy lettuce and had an abundant crop, more than we needed. Not my favourite, not sure that we'll do that one again next season, but we should have planted a rotating crop so that once these ones came on, let them go to seed and let the next batch be up ready to eat. We had a lovely little crop of turnip that were really, really good. First time I've grown them. Of course, in the garden, there's always another job to do. A couple of years ago, we had a polytunnel that we set up. There was a number of reasons that didn't work well for us because it was just far too hot in our climate, and it didn't get enough airflow. However, the reason that the framework is sitting there without a cover is because a windstorm came through and blew it off. It's been sitting there naked for about 2 years and just been a bit of an eyesore. So we decided that we would bite the bullet and get it back into a functional space this season. We've decided to turn it into a shade tunnel instead of a polytunnel, and in the Halcyon Bounty way, we've used up bits and pieces of material that we had available. So the first is reclaimed light-coloured shade mesh. The next is a piece of stripy shade mesh that we had, and the end we went out and bought a new section of green shade mesh. We think this is actually going to work out quite well for us. It gives us 3 different growing zones in there. The light shade mesh is only about a 25% shade reduction. The next section is 50, and I think the green section at the back is 70. So we can grow anything in there that from those things that need partial sun when the seedlings are coming up, right through to those things that like to grow in the shade. So we'll see how that goes. But what it does do is gives us a tidy space to work in. We've deliberately left the bottom sections of the middle open because on either side they either get direct morning sun or afternoon sun into those spaces. So it gives us another area within there where we can sit plants where they require a bit more actual direct sunlight, so they're not always in the shade. Anyway, it's all a bit of an experiment and we'll see how it goes. Although getting this set up again wasn't an enormous task, it did take us old girls 2 or 3 days. We tend to take a project on and just have a can-do attitude and bite it off one bite at a time. We do as much as we can, and then we stop and come back to it again the next day. The veggie garden, like all the others here, is just an ongoing evolution. And we've planned to set up a new section of raised beds for next season. Autumn's a great time because of the weather, allows you to work outside for a few hours without it killing you. And we're setting up 6 new beds in preparation for next spring. So we'll fill them. We might put in winter crop in a couple, but basically we'll just overwinter and have them ready for planting next spring. Well, I hope you've enjoyed a look at our ever-evolving veggie garden. We're always busy, 2 old girls living our best lives through art and gardening. Hopefully next time we'll catch you back in the studio or up in the labyrinth garden. Thanks for sticking with us through our creative garden adventures. We'd really appreciate it if you enjoyed this video, if you could give us a like and a follow. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.